Hello, kids. Papa Duke here. Time for another story. When we left off, young Cerdic challenged Merllyn to look under the rocks and predict what was under there. Well, let's find out what happens next. Episode 2. Vortigern turned his head toward the projection of slate, then back at the boy, then at Merllyn, his clouded left eye probing for a bluff. Merllyn, sensing danger, pointed to his pups and said, "My priests will examine this contrivance and confer upon its validity." The three apprentices sheepishly approached the pavement. Waddy and Swatty looked back at their master, eyes woeful like dogs who've been kicked, and took positions on either side of the slab. Snid looked underneath as the other two pulled upward, then with a yelp leapt backward, scurrying like a crustacean on all fours. All but Aurelianus stepped back. From beneath came two serpents, writhing and twisting in a chaotic dance, rolling down a small hill toward Merllyn, who was determined to hold his ground lest he should lose his position and argument. Merlin's white stallion had other thoughts and reared, dumping the priest to the ground. There were two adders, one the color of oak leaves in late season, the other with a pale letter V on its crown, and both had fangs deep into a miserable creature of the forest, some vole who wandered under the wrong rock. Neither was willing to forfeit its prize. In embarrassed indignation, Merllyn quickly rose to his feet, his countenance springly, and his face that of a young man once again. Surely there's some sorcery at play, thought young Aurelianus. First he is young, then old, then young. But the boy's attention turned again to the fortunate battle before him, for he knew of the snakes, but not of their metaphoric fight for plunder. "What say you, sorcerer?" inquired the boy, and again he jibed. "What omen is this? Or should I tell the king myself?" Merllyn stretched his fists outward at the adders, extending his smallest fingers with their long nails pointing, and widened his eyes. There was a pause. Nothing happened. "Tell us then, young man, what is the meaning?" asked Vortigern, his curiosity growing as fast as his impatience at such mysteries. "Two kings battle for the same spoils, neither conceding, neither winning. The outcome will be death for both, or—" Aurelianus paused for effect, then, "the outcome can be one of diplomacy. The question is, who will let go first?" Merllyn drew his sword and struck the serpents right through, separating them into fours, then eights, their jaws still clinging to the unfortunate rodent. His underlings dropped the slab and ran to the comfortable security of the rear of Merlin's horse, which the wizard himself mounted without a word. "And Cerdic is the name I was given by my father, not Aurelianus," said the boy with a newly found confidence to Vortigern. "Well then, young Cerdic, Cerdic of the many tongues, You are now the party's interpreter, said Vortigern with a broad smile, and turning toward his captain said, And Itterman, we have many other tasks that will require your talents and skills. You were a poor translator, as everyone knew. Ha ha! I can, well, we all can, that is, said Captain Itterman, bowing slightly to the king, his thanes mumbling and elbowing one another in restless confusion. Vortigern turned toward his high priest and said, Merllyn, I would like... But Merllyn interrupted. If it please your lordship, I will return to Powys to assist in the rebuilding. And Merllyn turned back to the west with his white horse, his attendants trotting along on foot behind. Merllyn looked old again as he glared back, thought the boy, who was now known as Cerdic of the Many Tongues, and who was held in high esteem by his new clan. Vortigern led his military party with haste through the forests and valleys of Artabadia, the area with no petty kings or chiefs of consequence. It was an area over which Vortigern ruled by default, being voted high king by all significant warlords, from the southern sea to the land of Elmet in the north. The party traveled east, fully aware that their base and stronghold at Kent had been left to the most inexperienced to defend. Vortigern did have some help in the defense of Kent in his absence. The traders from the continent who had profited him so well offered to send a small mercenary party, for a price, to protect Kent and the river inlet from Picts and pirates while he was campaigning in the west. He had agreed. It seemed a good stratagem to Vortigern at the time, but as he and his travel-weary forces approached their home, he had worrying thoughts. There had been small groups of Continentals setting up outposts along the eastern and southern coasts for several generations, mostly for trade, some as settlers. The migration had been slow enough to avoid alarm by native tribes, but several clans of the continent established themselves along the marshlands. They were hostile to the Iceni and the Trinovanti, first slaughtering the native tribes as rivals, then seizing the strong to sell. The ancient homeland of Boudica was becoming Anglia. The Angles, as they were known, had a multitude of seaworthy keels, which they filled with the youngest and fittest of the native Britons and shipped them over to continental kinsmen, who in turn profited in the slave markets of Rome. The port of call for this trade was the island called Reptcaster, off of the coast of Kent, and Vortigern controlled the trade. The continental Saxons, whom Vortigern had employed as auxiliaries, were led by the brothers Horsa and Hengist. Hengist, wearing sealskin and as always smelling like seaweed, was seated at the head of the table in the great hall, surrounded by a banquet fit for a returning hero when Vortigern and his party arrived on the island. More hungry than weary, the officers and cavalrymen took places at the table, interspersing among the mercenaries, comfortable with their allies. Vortigern approached Hengist and was greeted with a great big bear hug and laughter, and Hengist yielded the seat, choosing to sit at the right of his employer. This had been the custom when they met, whether it was business or pleasure, and Horsa would act as interpreter from the seat at Vortigern's left. But Vortigern motioned Hengist to sit at his left and ordered Cerdic to his right. This upset Horsa visibly, but Hengist laughed at it and pushed his brother over one seat. Hengist nodded at young Cerdic and said something softly to his brother, who grunted. As they feasted, Vortigern looked up, licked his fingers from dripping roast, and noticed a substantially larger force of mercenaries than when he had last occupied this chair. Before he could comment of the sum of the Saxon contingent, Hengist spoke. "You are young to be military advisor," the Saxon said to Cerdic, in the continental tongue the boy recognized immediately as that of the marauders which killed his parents. "No, I am not a military advisor," Cerdic said to the Saxons, repeating the statement for Vortigern's ear as well. "Cerdic of the many tongues, my interpreter," said Vortigern to the Saxons as he pulled at the plate of pig in front of him. "I see many more of your attachment than the last time we met. Have you multiplied? Are you breeding under my roof?" asked Vortigern with a curious smile. Hengist and Horsa both laughed too loudly, almost as berserkers would, thought Cerdic. "Well, something is amiss, kids. Hengist and Horsa sound like they're up to no good. And Cerdic, who used to be called Aurelianus, thinks he knows what it is. Let's find out tomorrow. Night-night."
Aš greit suverpsiu plonai linelius, išausiu tau drobelas, išausiu tau drobelą. Oi, aš išausiu baltai drobelą.
Your narrator and author of the story was Duke Pierce Reed. Illustrations, both visual and audio, by Douglas Black. James Rayner was the story consultant. Musical flourishments provided by Frank and Black. Papa Duke's Bedtime Stories is a podcast production of From Dark Water Studio, Chicago. And I am full staff, Papa Duke's virtual assistant. Join Papa Duke again tomorrow for another episode from the Red and the Gold series of stories of legend and history.